The old house stood on a hill overlooking the town. It had been empty for years, and people said it was haunted. But I didn't believe in ghosts. I was a writer, and I was looking for a quiet place to work on my new book. The house seemed perfect. It was a large house with many rooms. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and the floors were dusty. But there was a certain charm to the place. I could imagine myself writing there, surrounded by the silence and the history. I moved in the next day. The house was even bigger than I had thought. I spent hours exploring the different rooms. I found a library with shelves full of old books. I found a dining room with a long, empty table. And I found a bedroom with a 4-poster bed. I decided to set up my office in the library. It was the largest room in the house, and it had a big window that looked out over the town. I sat at the desk and started to write. The words flowed easily. I was so caught up in my work that I didn't notice the time passing. It was dark when I finally looked up. I was surprised to see that it was so late. I got up and stretched. I was tired, but I was also excited. I had written more in one day than I had in weeks. I couldn't wait to see what I would write next. I went downstairs to make some tea. The house was quiet. I could hear the wind whistling through the trees outside. I could hear the occasional creak of the old house settling. I made my tea and went back upstairs. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I started to read what I had written. I was impressed. The words were even better than I had remembered. I was starting to think that I might actually finish this book. I saved my work and closed my laptop. I was tired, but I was also happy. I had found a place where I could write, and I was finally making progress on my book. I went to bed that night with a smile on my face. I couldn't wait to start writing again in the morning. I woke up the next morning feeling refreshed. I made some coffee and went to my office. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I started to write, but the words didn't come as easily as they had the day before. I stared at the screen, but I couldn't think of anything to say. I was frustrated. I didn't understand why I was suddenly having trouble writing. I had been so productive the day before. I took a break and went for a walk around the house. I explored some more of the rooms that I hadn't seen yet. I found a ballroom with a dance floor. I found a study with a fireplace. And I found a secret room behind a bookcase. I went back to my office feeling a little better. I sat at my desk and tried to write again, but the words still wouldn't come. I was starting to get worried. I didn't know what was wrong. I had never had trouble writing before. I decided to take another break. I went downstairs and made some more tea. I sat in the dining room and drank my tea. I was thinking about what I should do. I didn't want to give up on my book, but I also didn't know if I could write it. I finished my tea and went back upstairs. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I took a deep breath and started to write. The words still didn't come easily, but I was able to write a few sentences. I was determined to finish this book, no matter how long it took. I wrote for a few hours, and then I took another break. I went for a walk around the house and explored some more of the rooms. I found a room that I hadn't seen before. It was a small room, and it was empty except for a chair and a table. I sat in the chair and looked around the room. I felt a strange feeling. I felt like I had been in this room before. I couldn't remember ever being in this house before, but I felt like I knew this room. I got up and walked around the room. I touched the walls and the table. I felt like I was trying to remember something. I sat back down in the chair and closed my eyes. I tried to think about why I felt like I knew this room. And then I remembered. I had been in this room in a dream. I had a dream a few weeks ago about being in a house. I had explored the house in my dream, and I had found this room. I had forgotten about the dream until now, but now I remembered it. I opened my eyes and looked around the room. I couldn't believe it. I had been in this room before, in my dream. I got up and walked out of the room. I went back to my office and sat at my desk. I opened my laptop and started to write. The words flowed easily now. I knew what I wanted to say. I wrote for hours, and I didn't stop until I had finished the chapter. I was exhausted, but I was also happy. I had finally finished a chapter of my book. I saved my work and closed my laptop. I went to bed that night and fell asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow. I woke up the next morning feeling refreshed. I made some coffee and went to my office. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I started to write, and the words flowed easily. I was making progress on my book, and I was starting to feel like I might actually finish it. I wrote for a few hours, and then I took a break. I went for a walk around the house and explored some more of the rooms. I found a room that I hadn't seen before. It was a large room, and it was full of old furniture. I walked around the room and looked at the furniture. I felt a strange feeling. I felt like I had been in this room before. I couldn't remember ever being in this house before, but I felt like I knew this room. I sat down on a chair and closed my eyes. I tried to think about why I felt like I knew this room, and then I remembered. I had been in this room in another dream. I had a dream a few weeks ago about being in a house. I had explored the house in my dream, and I had found this room. I had forgotten about the dream until now, but now I remembered it. I opened my eyes and looked around the room. I couldn't believe it. I had been in this room before, in my dream. I got up and walked out of the room. I went back to my office and sat at my desk. I opened my laptop and started to write. The words flowed easily now. I knew what I wanted to say. I wrote for hours, and I didn't stop until I had finished the chapter. I was exhausted, but I was also happy. I had finally finished another chapter of my book. I saved my work and closed my laptop. I went to bed that night and fell asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow. I woke up the next morning feeling refreshed. I made some coffee and went to my office. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I started to write, and the words flowed easily. I was making progress on my book, and I was starting to feel like I might actually finish it. I wrote for a few hours, and then I took a break. I went for a walk around the house and explored some more of the rooms. I found a room that I hadn't seen before. It was a small room, and it was empty except for a chair and a table. I sat in the chair and looked around the room. I felt a strange feeling. I felt like I had been in this room before. I couldn't remember ever being in this house before, but I felt like I knew this room. I got up and walked around the room. I touched the walls and the table. I felt like I was trying to remember something. I sat back down in the chair and closed my eyes. I tried to think about why I felt like I knew this room. And then I remembered. I had been in this room in a dream. I had a dream a few weeks ago about being in a house. I had explored the house in my dream, and I had found this room. I had forgotten about the dream until now, but now I remembered it. I opened my eyes and looked around the room. I couldn't believe it. I had been in this room before, in my dream. I got up and walked out of the room. I went back to my office and sat at my desk. I opened my laptop and started to write. The words flowed easily now. I knew what I wanted to say. I wrote for hours, and I didn't stop until I had finished the chapter. I was exhausted, but I was also happy. I had finally finished another chapter of my book. I saved my work and closed my laptop. I went to bed that night and fell asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow. Days turned into weeks, and the house continued to reveal its secrets. Each room I discovered seemed to echo with whispers of the past, fueling my writing in ways I couldn't explain. The dreams continued too, each one offering glimpses into different parts of the house, different moments in time. They weren't just dreams anymore. They felt like memories resurfacing. One afternoon, I stumbled upon a hidden staircase behind a tapestry in the library. It spiraled down into darkness, and a shiver ran down my spine as I hesitated at the top. but the pull was too strong to resist. I descended, the only light coming from the faint glow of the setting sun filtering through cracks in the boarded-up windows. The staircase led to a dusty, cobweb-filled cellar. The air was heavy and damp, and the silence was almost deafening. I explored cautiously, my footsteps echoing on the stone floor. In the far corner, I found a wooden chest, its lid covered in intricate carvings. My heart pounded in my chest. I felt like I was on the verge of uncovering something important, something that had been hidden for a long time. I lifted the lid of the chest slowly, revealing its contents: old letters tied together with faded ribbons, a small, tarnished silver locket, and a leather-bound diary. I carefully lifted the diary. It was brittle and worn, its pages filled with faded ink. I opened it gently, my fingers tracing the delicate handwriting. The diary belonged to a woman named Eliza, who had lived in the house a century ago. As I read, Eliza's story unfolded before me. She wrote of love, loss, and a secret that she had kept hidden for her entire life. She wrote of a hidden room, a place where she had kept her most precious memories. A room that no one else knew about. My breath caught in my throat. The hidden room. Was it possible that it still existed? I scanned the cellar, searching for any sign of a hidden door, a loose stone, anything that might lead me to Eliza's secret. After a thorough search, I found it. A small, almost invisible crack in the wall, concealed behind a stack of old crates. I pushed against the wall, and a section of it swung inward, revealing a narrow passage. I squeezed through the opening, my heart pounding with anticipation. The passage led to a small circular room. In the center of the room, there was a single object, a wooden music box. I picked it up, my fingers tracing the smooth, polished surface. It was beautifully crafted, with delicate carvings of flowers and birds. I opened the lid, and a haunting melody filled the room. The music was familiar, yet I couldn't quite place it. It was a sad, melancholic tune, filled with longing and regret. As I listened, a wave of emotion washed over me. I felt a connection to Eliza, to her pain and her secrets. I closed the lid of the music box, silencing the melody. I knew that I had stumbled upon something important, something that would change everything. I had found Eliza's hidden room, and with it, a piece of the puzzle that was my own connection to this house. I took the diary, the locket, and the letters back to my office. I spent the rest of the evening reading Eliza's words, piecing together her story. She had been in love with a man who had died tragically. She had never recovered from his loss, and she had spent the rest of her life in mourning. The secret she had kept hidden was the identity of her lover. He was a married man, a prominent member of the town. Their affair had been passionate and forbidden, and she had carried his child. Eliza had given the child up for adoption, believing it was the only way to protect them both. She had never stopped thinking about her child, never stopped wondering what had become of them. As I read these words, a chilling realization dawned on me. The melody of the music box. It was a lullaby, a song that Eliza had sung to her child. And I knew that lullaby. My mother used to sing it to me when I was a child. Could it be possible? Was I descended from Eliza? Was this house, this haunted house, actually my family home? The thought was overwhelming. I felt a sense of dizziness, a feeling that the world around me was shifting, rearranging itself. I looked around my office, at the dusty books, the peeling wallpaper, the antique furniture. Everything looked different now, charged with a new meaning. I spent the rest of the night lost in thought, trying to reconcile the story I had just read with the reality of my own life. The connection was too strong to ignore. The music box, the lullaby, the diary, it all pointed to one inescapable conclusion. I was connected to this house, to Eliza, to the secrets that had been hidden for generations. I knew that I couldn't stay in the house any longer. It was too much, too overwhelming. I needed to get away, to clear my head, to make sense of what I had discovered. I packed a bag and left the house in the early hours of the morning. I drove to a small coastal town, a place where I could be alone, where I could think. I checked into a small hotel and went to my room. I sat on the bed, staring out at the ocean. The waves crashed against the shore, a constant rhythm that echoed the turmoil in my own heart. I closed my eyes, trying to picture Eliza, trying to imagine her life, her love, her loss. And then I remembered something else, something that Eliza had written in her diary. She had written about a place where she had met her lover, a place by the sea. I opened my eyes, a sense of purpose filling me. I knew where I had to go. I had to find this place where Eliza's story had begun. I had to find the truth. The coastal town Eliza had written about was a few hours' drive away. The description in her diary was vague, but I recognized some of the landmarks she mentioned. A rocky cliff overlooking the sea, a secluded cove, a cluster of old fishermen's cottages. As I drove, I felt a strange sense of anticipation, a feeling that I was getting closer to understanding my own past. The landscape changed as I approached the town, the rolling hills giving way to rugged cliffs and sandy beaches. The air smelled of salt and seaweed, and the sound of the waves was a constant presence. I parked my car near the harbor and walked along the waterfront, searching for the places Eliza had described. The town was small and quaint, with narrow streets and colorful houses. It felt like stepping back in time, a place where the pace of life was slower, more connected to the rhythms of nature. I found the rocky cliff easily. It jutted out over the sea, offering a panoramic view of the coastline. I stood at the edge, gazing out at the vast expanse of water, imagining Eliza standing in the same spot, her heart filled with love and longing. I followed a narrow path down to the cove. It was a secluded spot, sheltered from the wind and waves. The beach was covered in smooth, white stones, and the water was crystal clear. I could see small fish swimming near the shore. This was it. This was the place where Eliza had met her lover. I could feel their presence in the air, the echo of their whispered conversations, the lingering scent of their stolen moments. I walked along the beach, my eyes scanning the sand for any sign of the past. I found a piece of driftwood, smooth and worn by the sea. I picked it up, feeling its weight in my hand. It felt like a connection to Eliza, a tangible link to her life. I sat down on a rock, overlooking the cove. I closed my eyes, trying to imagine what it must have been like for Eliza, meeting her lover in this secret place, knowing that their love was forbidden. I opened my eyes and looked around the cove. I noticed a small, almost hidden cave in the cliff face. I walked towards it, my curiosity piqued. The entrance to the cave was narrow and low. I had to crouch down to enter. Inside, the cave was dark and damp. I could hear the sound of dripping water. I fumbled for my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam of light illuminated the walls of the cave, revealing strange formations of rock. As I explored deeper into the cave, I found something that made my heart skip a beat. A small wooden chest hidden in a crevice in the wall. I recognized it instantly. It was the same chest that I had found in the cellar of the house, the chest that contained Eliza's letters and diary. But this chest was different. It was smaller, more ornate, and it was locked. I examined the lock, searching for a keyhole. I found it, hidden beneath a small carved flower. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the silver locket that I had found in the other chest. I opened the locket. Inside, there was a tiny folded piece of paper. I unfolded it carefully, revealing a single word. Rose. Rose. The tattoo that I had seen on Eleanor's shoulder. The rose. I looked at the lock on the chest. The keyhole was shaped like a rose. I took a deep breath and inserted the locket into the keyhole. It fit perfectly. I turned it gently, and the lock clicked open. I opened the chest slowly, my hands trembling. Inside, there was a single object, a small leather-bound book. I picked it up. It was a journal. I opened it and began to read. The journal belonged to Eleanor. It was her diary, her secret thoughts, her hidden feelings. And as I read, I began to understand. Eleanor was Eliza's descendant. She was the great-great-granddaughter of the woman who had lived in the house a century ago. And the secret that Eliza had kept hidden, the identity of her lover. It was Eleanor's grandfather. Eleanor had known about the house, about Eliza's story, for years. She had kept it hidden, believing that it was too much, too complicated. She had tried to distance herself from the past, but the past had a way of catching up. The attraction that I felt towards Eleanor, it wasn't just a coincidence. It was something deeper, something genetic, a connection that had been passed down through generations. I closed the journal, my mind reeling. Everything was starting to make sense now. The dreams, the house, the music box, the lullaby. It was all connected. I looked at the journal in my hands. It was more than just a book. It was a link to my past, a key to understanding my own identity. I knew that I had to talk to Eleanor. I had to tell her what I had discovered. I had to share this secret with her. I left the cave, the journal clutched tightly in my hand. I walked back to my car, my heart pounding with a mix of excitement and trepidation. I drove back to the house, the old haunted house that was now my family home. I parked the car in the driveway and walked towards the front door. I took a deep breath and opened the door. I stepped inside, ready to face Eleanor, ready to reveal the secrets of the past. The house was quiet when I entered. A stillness hung in the air, a sense of anticipation that mirrored my own. I could hear the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, a sound that seemed to amplify the silence. I found Eleanor in the library, sitting by the window, her gaze fixed on the garden. She looked up as I entered, her expression unreadable. "Eleanor," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I held out the journal. "I found this." She took the journal from my hand, her fingers brushing against mine. A jolt of electricity passed between us, a reminder of the complex emotions that bound us together. She opened the journal, her eyes scanning the pages. As she read, her expression changed. Her eyes widened, her breath caught in her throat. Tears welled up in her eyes. I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "It's your grandfather's journal," I explained. "It tells the story of Eliza." Eleanor looked at me, her eyes filled with confusion. "Eliza? Who is Eliza?" She was your ancestor," I said, "and mine." I told her everything, about the diary I had found in the cellar, about the music box, about the lullaby. I told her about the cave, about the other journal, about the connection between Eliza and her grandfather. As I spoke, Eleanor listened intently, her face pale. The tears streamed down her cheeks, but she didn't make a sound. She seemed to be absorbing every word, every revelation. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. She closed the journal and held it to her chest. I knew," she said finally. "I always suspected. There was something about this house, something that felt familiar, like a part of me was missing." "I felt it too," I said. "The dreams, the pull. It all makes sense now." Eleanor looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and understanding. "We're connected, Leo," she said, "not just by marriage, by blood." The silence returned, heavier now, charged with the weight of our shared history. The truth hung in the air between us, a fragile, unspoken thing. What does this mean?" Eleanor asked, her voice barely audible. I didn't have an answer. I didn't know what it meant. All I knew was that everything had changed. I don't know, I said, but I think we need to talk about it, about everything. Eleanor nodded slowly. She stood up and walked to the window, her back to me. She stared out at the garden, her shoulders shaking. I followed her, standing beside her at the window. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. The air was cool and still. "I've made mistakes, Leo," Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've kept secrets. I've hurt people." "I know," I said, "but we all make mistakes. But this," she said, turning to face me, "this is different. This changes everything." "I know," I said again, "but maybe it doesn't have to be a bad thing." Eleanor looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "What are you saying, Leo?" I took a deep breath. "I'm saying, maybe we can figure this out, together, step by step." She was silent for a long moment, her gaze not leaving mine. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the struggle between her past and her present, between her fear and her hope. Finally, she spoke. I don't know if I can," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I understand," I said, "but can we try? Can we at least talk about it?" Eleanor hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes," she said, "we can try." We stood there for a long time, watching the sun set, the sky ablaze with color. The silence between us was different now, not heavy and suffocating, but quiet and contemplative. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult. There would be challenges, obstacles, and difficult conversations. But for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. I reached out and took her hand. Her skin was warm and soft, and her touch sent a shiver down my spine. "I'm glad you did," I said. "I'm glad we found each other." We spent weeks exploring the house together, discovering new rooms, new secrets. We found Eliza's old writing desk, her collection of pressed flowers, her favorite reading chair. Each object we found brought us closer to her, closer to understanding her life, her heart. We also found a hidden room that we hadn't known existed. It was a small, cozy room, filled with light from a large window overlooking the garden. In the center of the room, there was a portrait of Eliza, painted when she was young. She was beautiful, with long, flowing hair and a gentle smile. Her eyes were filled with warmth and kindness. Looking at her portrait, I felt a sense of peace, a feeling that I had finally found my place, my connection to the past. We decided to restore the house, to bring it back to its former glory. We wanted to preserve Eliza's legacy, to honor her memory. We spent months cleaning, painting, and repairing the house, working side by side, our bond growing stronger with each passing day. My father was understanding, surprisingly so. He had sensed the change in our relationship, and he had accepted it with grace. He understood that we were connected in a way that he couldn't comprehend, and he respected our need to explore that connection. "Family is more than just blood," he said one evening as we sat together in the living room. "It's about love, understanding, and acceptance. And you too, you have that in abundance." The house was finally finished. It was beautiful, restored to its former grandeur. It was no longer a haunted house. It was a home. Our home. Eleanor and I stood in the library, looking around at the familiar surroundings. The books lined the shelves, the fire crackled in the hearth, and the portrait of Eliza hung proudly above the mantelpiece. "We did it," Eleanor said, her voice filled with emotion. "We found our way." I took her hand, our fingers intertwining. "Yes," I said, "we did." We looked at each other, our eyes meeting, a silent understanding passing between us. We had faced the past, we had confronted our fears, and we had found a way to build a future together. The connection we shared was unique, complex, and undeniable. It was a connection that transcended family ties, a connection that was rooted in our shared history, our shared secrets, and our shared love for the house, for Eliza, and for each other. We were family in every sense of the word, and we were together, finally and forever.
Subscribe to my channel.